why are so many young men in Europe being drawn to Islam? The reason being is because the void, it's the void. Nature abhors a vacuum. And so you've had the churches in Europe, whether it be the Catholic Church or the Protestant churches, they have stripped themselves of true theology. And the Catholic Church in Europe is as guilty as this of anyone else. You've had this progressive, weak, wishy-washy, liberal gospel being preached by, every pastor under the sun. And then you've got this religion which crops up, which shows affirmative action, absolute strength. These are the tenets which appeal to young men, particularly in Europe, and of course in the Middle East, but predominantly in Europe. A lot of the radicalism within Europe is now homegrown. It's not being imported, it's being homegrown. And so this is the key, driving force, is the fact that theology, like Christianity in Europe, has been stripped of its actual truth, its eternal truth. And that's not to say that, okay, there would be no conversion to Islam if Christianity was standing on its own 2 feet. But it's definitely the case that if you look at the UK, for example, you've got this progressive, weak Anglican church, which is basically saying that, left-wing politics is good, and, the predominant role of the church is to care about the environment and, all this kind of nonsense. And actually, of course, people don't just want a social gospel. They want eternal truth, and they want real faith. They want to be told, this is how you should live your life, right? This is the real meaning of life. It's not just about, the environment and net zero and whatever else that we're coming out with.
What you're talking about is really just the absence of authority and structure, and people actually crave that in the end. It reminds me of when I hosted Andrew Tate. I want to say it was a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, but he similarly said, I pressed him on why he left Christianity. Yeah. And the answer he gave, which was very interesting for me to consider, was he basically said Christianity became weak and Christians don't defend themselves. They allow people to disrespect Jesus Christ. And how are people supposed to be drawn to something that has been weak?
I reverted to Islam because I feel like the Islamic culture is the strongest. You feel the culture.
I was wondering, because you were Christian, and I definitely do not know enough about the Islamic faith to sit here and debate you on it. Yeah. I'm never a person that will debate somebody on something that I'm not an expertise on. Yeah. But I will say that I'm sad that you're not a Christian anymore, because I can sense, perhaps it's because you felt that Christians weren't doing a good job defending their beliefs.
Yeah, I think that God should be feared. I believe that God should be feared. I fear God. It's one of the only things I fear. And I believe that also you see God to a degree, or you see religion, how you see yourself. And I see myself as a person of strong principles and strong morals. And I like to think of myself as the kind of person nobody really wants to cross, not because I'm a psycho, but because I'm a man of capability and I'm smart and I'm strong and nobody wants to make an enemy of me. So I feel like I find an affinity to a belief system which has very similar outlooks. And there's a whole bunch of other things I can say from the Quran and Islamic texts, etc. But to keep it very vague and very broad for people who are not Islamic, I felt God when I was in an Islamic country. If I went to an Islamic country,
that's the problem.
I felt God. You don't feel any God. How is it a Christian country if Satanists are mocking Jesus on the streets?
I understand what you're saying.